Hey there, everyone. So I wanted to talk about evolution and natural selection. And for a lot of us that have grown up since the 90s, we know evolution through this game here, Pokemon, where as you grow an organism up, it will evolve into something different over time. And it's unfortunate that they use this word evolution with this game because this is not evolution. This is not a different species from this or this. Really, this is just the organism growing up and changing. When we talk about evolution, we're talking about the change in the genes of a population over time. And there's three key parts to that definition. A change in the genes, meaning we see a change in the DNA, the actual code of the letters in the DNA, of a population. We're not talking about an individual here. We're talking about the trait that we're talking about being across the entire population of that particular organism. And then over time, where we see in some organisms that change might take place over the course of a month or two, where with other organisms it can take several millennia. And there's lots of examples of evolution that we can see every day. We see antibiotic resistant bacteria. We have evidence of snakes having lost their legs, giraffes with their long necks, and then, of course, us as well. And so the main person that was considered the father of this idea of natural selection through evolution is Charles Darwin, who was a British man who had a lot of different careers over his life, including a doctor and a priest. But he eventually settled on natural history and had the opportunity to go on a trip on the HMS Beagle to the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America as the ship's naturalist. And over the course of that 5-year journey, they were able to stop at several of the different islands, take samples from them, not only of plant species and animal species, but also of rocks. And they were also, of course, able to make lots of observations, drawings of things that they were seeing. And he took all of the ideas that he came up with over the course of that voyage, based off of the evidence that he gathered, and wrote a book called On the Origin of Species. And in this book, he put forth two main ideas. The first is the idea of descent with modification. That is, the newer forms, both on the planet today and near the surface in the fossil record, are just modified descendants of older species. So as we dig further and further down into the ground, we should see things become less and less like what we see on the planet today. And the second is the idea of natural selection. That is, that the organisms that have the best traits for that particular environment are going to have the easiest time surviving and pass on those traits, which will give them a high amount of fitness. So when we talk about fitness in evolution, we're not talking about who can run the farthest or fastest. Fitness is just how many offspring are you having. So if you have a lot of offspring, that means you probably have some pretty good traits, and so you're going to have higher fitness. But if you're not having a lot of offspring, you probably don't have very good traits, and that means a lower amount of fitness. And so within a population, we have variation. So not all of the members of a species are clones of each other. There's differences. If you think about your class, you have lots of different looking people in your class. You don't look like everyone else. You look somewhat different. And it's the same with most species. They're a little bit different than the other ones. And that's a good thing. Variation helps a population survive when the environment changes, because some of the members of that species might have the right traits to be able to still survive, even if the rest of them don't. We're also looking at competition going on here. The individuals that have the easiest time competing and are best able to get water and food to be able to survive and then find a mate, these are going to be the ones passing on their traits. The ones that have a very difficult time finding water and food are not going to be surviving, and their traits are not going to be passed on. Also, as the environment changes, the organisms that have the best adaptations will be the ones that are surviving, and that goes back with that variation idea. So an adaptation is just some trait that helps you to survive in your environment. So in the Arctic, you're going to want blubber or thick fur to be able to survive that cold environment. Having blubber and thick fur would be a very poor adaptation to have in the tropical rainforest, though. It all goes down to what environment are you in that will determine the best traits to have to survive in it. And so then, like we were saying, the individuals that reproduce the most will be the ones passing their traits on the most, and that's going to change the overall population. So over time, if a organism is born with a great trait that gives them higher fitness, after several generations, you will probably see the entire population have that trait because that organism was reproducing the most, their offspring were reproducing the most, their offspring were reproducing the most, and now we have evolution occurring. And it's important to remember that all of this is based on the environment and how it changes. So as the environment changes, so too does the best traits to have. So if you put a polar bear and a lion in each of the other's environments, they would not be successful because they don't have the best traits for survival. It all goes down to whatever environment you're in. And we've seen the planet's environment change a lot over the course of its history. So that means the best traits to survive, those have changed as well. The best traits to survive during the Ice Age were not the same traits that were the best to survive during the time of the dinosaurs. So if we take a look at the giraffes like I was saying before, we have these giraffe ancestors here. This is not a giraffe. This is an ancestor species. And you can see we've got variation in terms of the size of the neck. Some have a shorter neck, some have a longer neck. Well, the ones with the longer neck are at an advantage because they're going to have an easier time getting access to food, easier time seeing potential predators out there, and so they're going to be the ones that survive. The ones with the shorter necks, they're going to die off. And as these ones with the longer necks survive, that means they're also going to be passing their traits on to their offspring. So we're going to see the population change to not have these shorter necks and to have exclusively longer necks. And those ones are, of course, going to have babies that might even have longer necks than them, and even longer necks than, the next generation. So over time, we're seeing the necks get longer and longer. Shorter necks, tough luck. Till we get to the modern day giraffe, where we have this very long neck that gives them great access to food, great chance to see predators coming, and they have the best chance of surviving and passing their traits on. So I hope this helps you understand evolution and natural selection a little bit more, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.